Hey folks, it's Fernando doing a video for the More Survivalist. As I always say, if you have any questions or you want me to do any videos, let me know in the comment section. I'll do my best to reply to that. And this is the case. I got a question from the dude who says, for a survival knife, you've given high marks to the trade Extreme Survival SCHF9. Yes, I have, and it's this knife right here. Given this most recent video, do you now favor the Glock survival knife over the Straight? It's a tough question, especially because they are both excellent knives. You really cannot go wrong with either one. Maybe one is more of a heavier duty, maybe not heavy duty would be the correct word, because they are both very tough knives. You can beat the crap out of either one of these, but this is heavier, as an intrinsically heavier blade and such, so you can chop better definitely with the SCHF9. At the same time, the handle and a couple other things are better on your Glock knife, so you have a better fighting knife, no doubt. It's also lighter, and what happens here is you have a lighter knife, right? It's a better cutting tool. You know, that's a little bit too heavy. Okay, so it chops very well. You can cut with it, you can prepare food with it. It's not nearly as comfortable or as nice as this other one, being lighter and with a better handle, the better grip. This one is a little bit more messy in terms of the design being aesthetically pleasing, but some of it just hasn't been as well executed from the concept of the designer to the execution. I mean, it just feels a little bit too fat. You know, a little bit too much stuff going on. I had to cut it a little bit because it has some edges here that were not comfortable at all. So it has a few things. These grooves, you know, unless you have super fat fingers, it's just not going to be fitting you. So you can use it, and it has okay grip. Now the simple truth is that the Glock handle is just better. It's just more comfortable. So that's that. Both are excellent knives. This one is a little bit heavier and more choppy. This one is a little bit more stabby, cutty kind of thing. If you force me to choose between one, I'm going to be going with a Glock knife, simply because I find myself, and I'm going to be going through this a little bit more in this video, I think this is a more realistic survival knife. The fighting ability, you know, how many knife fights do I get myself in every year? Not nearly as much as you would think, right? It's a very rare thing, but it happens, you know. Think about this for a second and be completely honest with yourself. What are the chances of you needing a knife to defend yourself, which you already know it's extremely low? You know, how many people use a knife in a defensive situation? You see it every once in a while in the news. It actually happens. Now, it's definitely rare. It's not a common thing, especially if you're going to be having a gun with you, right? But many times you don't, and a knife is all you have, and knives are used for self-defense. Actually, it's used for self-defense kind of often. Still rare enough that there's a good chance you'll go through your entire life without ever having to stab anyone. Now, if you think about this kind of survival situation, that is even more rare. What I mean by this is, what are the chances of you being dropped in the middle of Alaska, in the middle of the Amazons, in the middle of Siberia, and you having to use your survival knife for surviving, for cutting, for chopping wood, and building your shelter, and building your fire and such? How many incidents have you seen of that kind of true wilderness survival thing? We are all different. Your situation may be completely different from mine. Maybe you're watching this from a little cabin in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by hundreds of miles of nature and nothing else, bears, unicorns, and beavers and whatnot. Maybe you're watching this from your suburbs. Maybe you're watching this from your mom's basement, from a condo where you live with your wife and your kid. Which one of those is it? Only you know. You know, I know for sure which one is more likely. That much I know. I know that because of that, I know that this kind of survival situation is not nearly as likely as this other one, okay? As rare as this one may be. At the same time, these are both very tough knives, and you can use the lighter, thinner Glock knife. You can use it for batoning as well. So if forced to do so, if you find yourself And that's why the model 81, which is the one with the saw, this is the survival knife and the field knife. Names that suit these two rather well, because this is a good soldiering knife for a soldier, something that's very light like this is, but yet tough, and an actual fighting knife. That does well. And the same thing with the saw, even though it's not a chopping knife, you have that saw that somewhat compensates for that. So I definitely see this as a wilderness survival knife as well. Maybe not as well suited as some of the larger knives that we have. But we have to keep it honest. We have to be realistic about this. As great as it is watching the YouTube videos of stuff, how many times have you read of someone having, ending up in a true wilderness survival situation for days or weeks or months? It's usually the kind of thing we go looking for. I don't know about you, but if I want to find myself hiking and walking in the woods and mountains and such, I have to actually put an effort to that, drive myself to somewhere like that and find myself there. Maybe it's not your case. Maybe that's completely, maybe you have a kind of job where you find yourself, one of these oil lines through Alaska. Maybe you're a pilot somewhere and there's a chance of you being dropped in God knows where, finding yourself in that thing. It is not the most likely thing, all right? But going back to the question about those two slightly favoring the Glock, both are excellent knives, especially like in the straight SCHF9, the finish, which is quite decent. And as you see, these are both 1095. As it starts wearing, you start having a little bit more rust, but the finish that it originally had is quite good, especially because it has no friction. Usually these days you see a lot of this crap in tactical knives that's almost like sandpaper. It just adds a ton of friction, which no reasonable person would want in a knife that they're actually using. Yeah, it looks good, and it's mostly about marketing and pricing, and building. It's cheaper to put this kind of paint, and it's pretty forgiving in the finish that you put on it, but it adds a ton of friction, and as you see, it just collects dirt, crap, and waste all over the knife. If you're going to be using the knife for cutting food, preparing food and such, this is not a good idea. It's also not a good idea to avoid rust, because a damp crap stuck to the blade makes it more likely to be rust all over. So back to the question that I had here. It goes on. Similarly, would you replace the Victorinox Hiker, Hultafors, or Kershaw lifter? Those would be the ones that I have about here. So this is the Hultafors, which is a very nice heavy-duty kind of Mora knife, but much tougher. I like it a lot. This is a lifter, which is just a folding knife, more of a tactical kind of a folder. And finally, you have the Hiker right here. So similarly, would you replace the Victorinox Hiker, Hultafors, Kershaw lifter, all of which you've done videos on, with the Glock 7881 for your EDC choice? Thanks, and keep up the good work. Well, as an EDC choice, would I EDC a Glock knife? I just don't see it, honestly. I don't see myself EDC carrying, as in really everyday carry a Glock knife. Personally, no. Maybe you will have to look at your local laws. There's a good chance it's not even legal, depending on where you are, maybe or not. But usually, with a blade this size, check it. Make sure you check those laws. There's a good chance it's not legal. If it is, you should ask yourself: do I really want to EDC a Glock knife all day long? It's going to be, again, depending on what you do on your daily life. If you work in an office all day and you have a Glock knife with you, I don't know if it makes all that much sense. It's definitely a great knife to have all day if you can. Maybe it's not really that practical. And then you're talking about the lifter, the Hultafors. The Hultafors is a good knife. It's an excellent knife, actually. It's very tough. Again, I don't see myself EDCing any kind of fixed blade. That's why I go with a folder. I EDC like a ZT0630 and a different kind of multi-tool, Leatherman Charge. So would this be a good EDC? Definitely. The Victorinox Hiker would be an excellent EDC little knife. And even though it's not a survival knife as some of the larger blades, what the Hiker has, I'm going to be leaving links below for all this stuff in Amazon in case you want to check it out. The thing is, you have a blade that it's not, it's just a cutting tool. You know, it's a handy cutting tool, but it's not, you cannot abuse it in any way. It's a rather fragile blade. At the same time, you have a set of tools that complement that very nicely, because you have your screwdriver, which this, yes, you can use for a little bit of prying, and you also end up having a saw, which is excellent, and it allows you to cut through larger pieces of wood, especially since you don't have an actual chopping blade, but with a small saw. It's small, but it's quite good. With this saw, you can cut rather decent pieces of wood and prepare a fire or a shelter or whatever that you may be needing. Definitely in an emergency situation, it would be nice to have a Victorinox. And yes, it is decent. It's actually very good as an EDC knife. There's people that have carried Victorinox knives as their daily pocket knife for their entire lives, and very happy with that. So yeah, you have a ton of different ideas of what a survival knife is. The more traditional survival knife would be something like this. For most people, a survival knife would be a knife that has a set of tools there. I almost dropped this one. This one is actually a quite good one. The Aitor Jungle King 2. It's a little bit of a more compact version of the Jungle King 1. This is actually a knife that's in service in different places. In Spain, it's used by some of the armed forces. You have a decent knife. Sometimes people confuse these with the Chinese crappy copies. No, this is very sharp. It's very strong as well. It's not heavy. Not nearly as heavy as it seems. This is kind of an alloy, aluminium of some kind, but very strong pinned blade, super strong and sharp with a good tip and a good saw. And you have a smaller blade, so if you're going to be the quintessential survival situation of being stuck in a deserted island somewhere, this is maybe one of your best options, especially because you have a set of tools available. You have a capsule with some fishing hooks, sinkers, and lines. You have some cord. You have your slingshot thing there. And you have two separate blades, one for smaller, finer, detailed cutting. So if you're going to be leaving me in a deserted island, probably you're going to be wanting this knife. Now, let's go back. What are the chances of you being left in a deserted island where this is your best option? I don't know. You have to be honest with yourself regarding that. Another idea, a good alternative, instead of going with that kind of thing of having stuff in the sheath and the hollow handle, is having a more traditional fixed blade. In this case, it's a Bussy knife, limited edition. I chose a 357 number and simply got a good sheath for it and put together a decent little survival kit so as to keep in there. So this would be a good survival knife as well. Maybe this one, yeah, now I'm thinking about it, I know the stuff I have here is better than that one, so this would be the one, changing my mind, the one I'd take to a deserted island instead. But you usually want, if you're going to be having a knife for woodworking and that sort of stuff, usually the bigger blades is where it's at. So you start looking at your BK7s, even better, something like this, 10, 12-inch knife. This is, if I'm going to be left in a forest, for example, and I have to survive there, yeah, give me my Bushwhacker Mistress, which is a strong, heavy-duty, big blade. And I'm not alone in this line of thought. Actually, if you look at some of the some of the blades used by those frontiersmen many years ago, back 100 and something years ago, they would go with something like this. This is actually what was used. This is one of those knives. It comes from that period. This is a very old blade. Check out that size. There's no bullshit here, guys. This is a real thing. Look how big that is. Look at the bone handle. Look at the carbon steel, how it pit, rust, and it keeps on going. People sometimes freak out. Oh no, it's carbon steel, it's going to be rusting. Well, this thing rusts and hasn't lost any of its cutting ability. It's actually very sharp. I sharpened this myself. No, I'm not 200 years old, guys. This is use. But it just goes to show that, you know, these bigger knives, it's not something that's about marketing now. No, bigger knives were the chosen, the way to go when people needed a true tool, so as to make it in some of these places where you needed something to be both an axe, a knife, a digging tool, a hammer, a fighting knife as well. So this is carbon steel, softer. I bet it's going to be 50 something, 50 under 55 maybe even. So it's kind of softer steel. Look at how worn that blade is. That means it's been sharpened time and again over the years, and I contributed to that with my own sharpening thing. Check out that tip. This is a very narrow tip, and I think that the trick in this kind of thing is being softer. And we go back to the Glock bayonet knife shape. Being softer, it's more likely to maybe bend, but it won't break. Look at how it has survived all these years, and the tip, yeah, sure, I reprofiled it a little bit, but just a little bit of work. Look at how narrow that thing. This is a fearsome fighting knife. You know, if you get chopped with this or you get stabbed with this, it's almost like a little sword. So it's no joke. So going back to that thing, what are the chances of you needing knives for different things? I honestly think that we all like to fantasize about different possible situations. Realistically, we want something that is tough, that is strong, that is durable, it's not going to be breaking on us, that we can actually carry. Maybe that's why the real knife used most of the time is just a folder. And maybe this is, in the modern age, the real survival knife. A folder you can have with you all day. Still strong enough, especially this one is pretty tough as well, so you can put good amount of force in that, but it's also a good fighting knife. If you have to defend yourself against someone, man, this is a very decent self-defense knife. So I hope this basically answered the question, you know, what's the best survival knife? It's going to be depending on what you may end up likely to need, depending on where you are, where you live, the kind of life that you have, where you find yourself often. But yeah, absolutely, the Glock is definitely a great way to go. Most of these are actually excellent knives in their own right. Guys, it's going to be all for now. Remember to subscribe, take care, see you in our next video. Have a great day.